everyone. Welcome to the September edition of the Paulding County Planning Commission. If you would, please, if you have a mobile device, telephone or otherwise, please turn it to silence or off so it doesn't interrupt the proceedings of the meeting. We're going to dispense with the reading of policies and procedures for participation in a public meeting. Those rules and regulations are usually posted just at the table there or just outside the door. Please take a copy if you would like. I'd advise everybody that this is the Paulding County Planning Commission is a recommending body. It will hear each case and give 15 minutes both to those that wish to speak on behalf of the application and then 15 minutes to those that wish to speak in opposition to the application. I'd ask you to be courteous at those times and direct all your comments to the chair. Any decision made by this body will be forwarded to the Board of Commissioners at 7 o'clock this evening for their consideration. Do I have that time right? Just to make sure I'm not misquoting. Okay. There are no applications before for the City of Hiram, so all four of these applications will be considered by the Paulding County Board of Commissioners. This time I'd ask if the Planning Commission had an opportunity to review the minutes from the previous session of this body and whether you have any edits, comments, or concerns. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion. I have a motion to approve by Mr. Stokes and a second by Mr. Leggett. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes, I believe, 4-0 and 1. And Planning Commission members, if you would, make sure your mics are turned on so that everyone can hear your questions or responses. Again, the applicant must be present for the application to be considered. That is also the case at the Board of Commissioners meeting this evening. This time I'd ask Mr. Robinson if you would please call the first application.
Good afternoon. First application, 2018-08Z, application by Fall Leaf Residential LLC to rezone approximately 26.26 acres from R2 Suburban Residential to R55 Active Adult Residential Zoning District for age-restricted subdivision development. Property is located in land lot 907, District 3, Section 3 on the west side of Dallas-Ackworth Highway, east side of Frey Road. It's recommended by staff for approval with 19 stipulations. On this one, we have had several calls from adjoining property owners with questions. The applicant is present.
The applicant, please come around, sign in, and state your name and address your comments to the chair. And again, you have 15 minutes to present. You can use all of that time or you can reserve some of it for rebuttal. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joel Larkin, and I'm with Sam's Larkin, Huff and Valley in Marietta. And I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the applicant. It was just 3 or 4 months ago when the Planning Commission was considering the new zoning classification R55. And at that time, Ann talked to you about the great demand and the changes in the market and how important this product is. And I think you've got 3 applications last month and this month already for this. Fortunately, you've had first-class developers that are making these applications. And again, today, I'm pleased to be representing a builder-developer that's been in the metropolitan Atlanta market for as long as I've been practicing law. When I was downtown in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we were working with these same individuals on other projects. So they've got long track record and they're good folks. I do want to bring to your attention that the site plan that we have on the board is going to change somewhat because since filing this application, as is typically the case, we've met with your various departments to discuss their reaction and their concerns. And one of those meetings was with the DOT. And in those discussions, we discussed having 2 entrances on either end of Fry Road instead of the one out on Dallas-Ackworth Highway, which puts us in a better position to meter traffic out into the heavier traffic on Dallas-Ackworth Highway. As a part of those discussions, we also discussed participating with them in facilitating their improvements to the roads in the area. And you'll see in the staff recommendations that they've requested and we've agreed to donate additional right-of-way on both Frey Road and Dallas-Ackworth Highway. We also, in anticipation of a future improvement project that's under contemplation. I don't think it's scheduled to improve Dallas-Ackworth Highway. We've been asked and we've agreed to give a 25-foot easement along the right-of-way of Dallas-Ackworth Highway. And that's one of the conditions that's been recommended by staff and we have agreed to. I understand there's some folks here in the audience who have questions. We've not had the opportunity to talk with them. So recognizing that we've got the support of staff and your various departments, I'm going to go light on comments now and listen to what they have to say. And then once we hear from them, I'll address their comments.
Just for the record, though, questions from the Planning Commission, this goes for both those that would speak on behalf of an application or against an application. The questions from the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners do not count against your time. At this point, I just want to confirm that you have 19 listed stipulations and you're in agreement with all 19 of those.
We're in agreement with all of them. We would like to clarify that 25-foot easement. The purpose is not stated on there. Our understanding of the purpose is that it's a slope and grading easement if and when they widen the road, and that they will restore our buffer upon completion of that work. If we could clarify it that way, we're agreeable to that.
Let's try to muddle through that one right now, just so that we have it have the language correct. Mr. Jones?
That's stipulation number 6.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
So as a slope and maintenance easement, and you will restore the buffer once any of that activity takes place.
That's correct.
And then I would propose a 20th stipulation that allows us to, with staff permission based on a grading and landscaping plan, disturb the other buffers where necessary and replant them as appropriate. Your ordinance, I don't think, is crystal clear on how that works. And
I don't know. My shorthand is rather long-handed, so. All right. Restate your 20th proposed.
okay.
Stipulation.
Owner developer shall be permitted to disturb and replant the exterior buffer upon submission and approval of a grading and landscaping plan to staff.
Disturb the non-disturbance buffer?
Yeah, your ordinance talks about it's non-disturb unless, I mean, it's not crystal clear to us, and I know generally speaking, that seems to be allowed, but we wanted to clarify that so we'll know as we engineer it where we can get into the buffer, because typically on the edges is where it's the sparsest, and we want to make sure we have a good buffer.
So as the 20th, you're asking to be allowed to perform activities within the non-disturbance buffer based on an approved landscaping plan and reestablish that
Yes.
once activities cease, development activities cease.
Yes. And again, it would
Am
be
I
something.
capturing that right? I mean, I want to make sure
Well,
that,
we'll,
And I
if you
want-
like,
wanna
we'll
make
get
sure
with
they-
staff between the meetings and come up with the exact language, but I wanted to raise the concept for discussion.
well, if that's the case, we can leave that 20th for consideration by the Board of Commissioners this evening, because I don't want to approve something here as a recommendation.
You can approve the concept. You could say number 20 is going to be about replanting any buffers that are disturbed.
Okay.
And then by this evening, we'll have some language to put on the agenda
Okay.
for it.
All right. Is there any other questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make one comment.
Yes, sir.
Regards for speaking of the buffer and their stipulation number 20. The ordinance requires, in most cases here, 15-foot buffer. They actually have a demonstrated 25-foot buffer, and I think they were that was something they wanted to also make sure, they're going to do a bigger buffer than what's required.
Okay. But that doesn't need to be in the stipulations.
I just wanted to make everyone aware.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Ashmore?
when water created its stipulations, it was based on this plan. And there is a water stipulation now about looping from 278 to Fry Road. I would like some flexibility to be able to work with the
Back
developer.
up. You said from 278 to Fry Road.
Or,
You mean
sorry, Dallas
Ackworth?
Ackworth to Fry Road. If they are going to be relocating their primary entrances to both off of Fry Road, I would like to discuss the stipulations prior to this evening's meetings with,
I'll let y'all do that after, but we'll need to get with Ms. Ashmore. to have
We're
a discussion.
agreeable to the looping stip, subject to if they have a different request, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the planning commission to the applicant? Board of Commissioners, any questions?
I've got a question, and it's more directed to community development, so it's a and question. In our R55, did we change it, you can't have a single garage?
We did. We required
Okay.
two-car garage.
Is applicant aware of that? Because in our backup and in the material we got, it does show elevations with single garage.
We are aware that two-car garage is required.
Okay.
Not happy about it, but we're aware.
I'd like to ask Mr. Jones, I know Fry Road is not the widest road in Baldwin County. Do you foresee having to widen that road because of an additional 200 cars on that road?
Right now, we have about 700 cars per day on that road, so, as part of the improvements, they'll have to, make sure everything is up to snuff with the county road, just like in our development regulations. So I don't see an issue. We paved it a year or so ago, so it's in pretty good shape.
I assume that aspect will be pursued further in plan review with the developer.
Yes, sir, along with, everything else as part of meeting the development regulations, the accesses, and looking at all that. Anything DOT related will be, yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board of Commissioners, any further questions?
If I can use 30 more seconds, I understand since I got here today that there is an adjoining property owner that wants to talk to us about the boundary line, and obviously we need to talk with them and clarify that in order to move forward along his particular boundary. So we understand that we need to do that if there is an issue. I believe it's up in the northeast corner.
All right.
But whoever he is, we understand that, and we're prepared to talk with him about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would wish to speak on behalf of this application? Is there anyone that would wish to speak in opposition to this application or may have questions, comments, or concerns regarding it? Hearing none, at this time, I will entertain a motion from the Planning Commission regarding application 2018-08-Z.
I move we approve it with the 19 stipulation plus one.
Do you approve the modification of item number 6, stipulation number 6? We have a motion from Mr. Stokes.
Chairman Palmer, did you ask for opposition or questions?
I did.
Oh, well, we didn't hear it. Okay. We apologize.
I have never been accused of not being able to be heard.
We were busy taking notes.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Stokes to approve the 19 listed stipulations with the amendment that was notated earlier on stipulation 6, with an added 20th stipulation for a replanting of buffers that are disturbed to be worked out between this session and the Board of Commissioners session this evening. And I have a second from Mr. Leggett. All in favor? All opposed? We have, it passes 3, 1, and 1. I'm gonna record this right quick before I forget, so. Mr. Robinson, if you would.
The next application, 2018-10Z, application by Wintergreen Development LLC to rezone approximately 74.06 acres from R2 suburban residential to R55 active adult residential zoning district for an age-restricted subdivision development containing approximately 349 detached home sites. Property is located in land lots 371, 441, and 442, District 19, Section 2, north of Macklin Road, east of the Poplar Springs Road, but they have frontage on each, and it's in Commission Post 1. Staff has recommended approval with 18 printed stipulation, and on this one right here, we have had calls which concerns on access and traffic. Applicant is present.
If the applicant will please come around, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Thank you. As I said before, my name is Joel Larkin. I'm with Sam's Larkin, Huff and Valley in Marietta, and I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of Wintergreen Development. This is a related entity of Windsong Properties, and you met the gentleman who own and operate Windsong Properties when we had the hearings on this new R55 development. Mr. Romine is sitting back there in the kind of shepherd shirt, and Mr. Smith is behind him in the next row. They spoke at that meeting, and I think some of you talked with them. You may have even had an opportunity to go out to some of their developments. They've been probably one of the more active developers for this type of product in Paulding County, and Cobb County, Cherokee County over the last 20 or so years. They've done 2 different pods in Seven Hills, and they've done quite a few developments in Cobb County near the Paulding County line. They've located this tract on the northwest corner of Poplar Springs and Macklin Road. It's actually 3 tracts of property that they've assembled. On the direct corner, it wraps around Georgia Landscape, and on a couple of the other corners, there's some commercial uses. I don't know if they're zoned or non-conforming, but this is kind of a mixed area. Of the property that they're buying is older homes. It's mostly a farm and related homes that have been in a family a long time. And there's some similar type properties around it. This is in the overlay corridor along Macklin and would be suitable for commercial development if they so chose. But they've identified this property as a unique piece that's suitable for development under the R5 classification. As with the other application, we've met extensively with the DOT and with Water and Sewer, and it's been through the plan review process, and we have staff's recommendation of approval on it. This has got some unique issues on it. It actually could be served with sewer by Paulding County if they wanted to pump to the west. There's also a manhole just on the Cobb-Paulding line that Cobb has in the past entered into development agreements to serve parts of Paulding County. When you look at the stipulations, there's actually one that addresses the possibility that we go to Paulding and use a pump station, and another that addresses if we can get an agreement with Cobb County. Water and Sewer is agreeable to either way, and I think I speak correctly when I say they would prefer if we could figure out how we could get it into Cobb County, because it will gravity flow that way instead of having to add another pump station. And we're hoping if we do that, that we may also open an opportunity for some of the other property owners around there to have sewer access by gravity flow. So we're looking at that, and there's a couple stipulations on that issue. And we would, it's not immediately clear if you weren't aware of that fact, that we have that option. There's one stipulation that relates to go into Cobb County that requires that we have that agreement in place. Here we go, number 12. It requires a memorandum of understanding with Cobb County before we can get a preliminary plat submitted. the understanding that we have the water and sewer, and I confirmed that before we went in, is that should be preceded by, if we go to Cobb County, then we have to have that in hand in order to submit a preliminary plat. The other stipulation is number 16, and that covers if we elect to go to Paulding County. So that one should be preceded if Paulding County is going to serve it with sewer, just so we don't end up with competing stipulations. Other than that, we're in agreement with staff's recommendations, and we would again like to see a stipulation 19 along the lines I discussed, where it discusses if we need to get into the buffers around the edges, that provided we get staff approval to do so and have a planting plan, we can do so. I understand we have some folks here in the audience who are concerned about traffic issues. Rest assured, we are too. Before we filed this application, we met with the state DOT because they've got all kinds of plans in place to improve Macklin Road. And we are in discussions with them about where and what the access to Macklin Road will look like. We see that as our primary access, and we're hoping that'll be at a median break. We show a secondary access on Poplar Springs, and the stipulations we have with staff, there is a stipulation that talks about if and when we get to Poplar Springs, that we're going to do a development agreement with them relating to improvements that can be made on Poplar Springs. That's a pretty curvy and heavily traveled road, so we are in discussions with them. But this is a project that we anticipate we would phase out over a number of years, perhaps 10, starting with the main access on Macklin and working our way, to the east. So there's going to be time for us to work with the state and with the county to look at what can be done to Poplar Springs Road. And we obviously want a safe access for our residents as well. Staff is aware, and I don't know if you all have been privy to them ever, but Windsong has done a number of traffic studies over the years for their various developments. And with the population that they have, you get a completely different reaction and a different impact on traffic than you'd get with a commercial or a regular single-family development. These folks are usually in their 60s or 70s. They're not getting up to go to work or school in the morning. They avoid the peak traffic. Their number of trips per day is less than half what you'd get from a regular single-family home with a family living in it. So this has a lower impact than a normal subdivision, if you will. So we think the combination of the improvements that are going to be made on Macklin, the improvements we're committed to working with the DOT on, and the type of residents that we have is going to make this the most suitable and best use for this property. And we're ready to respond to any questions that you have.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission? Board of Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Davis?
I have one question. Oh, he's going.
Go ahead, Roger.
I know the eastern side of the northern part of your property borders that junkyard. Are you going to do any kind of additional buffer there to prevent Mr. Myers' junkyard from, having problems there?
The eastern side of the northern. I know we've got Georgia Landscaping down there in the corner.
Yeah, it'd be this northern side of here. This.
Okay, because I've spoken today to the property owner just to the north, and it's a nice family that.
Yeah, this is junkyard up here.
Point to it? Okay, yeah. At this point, we haven't engineered the property, but obviously, and I'll let Mr. Smith talk, obviously, we want a pleasurable experience for our residents, and we want them to like the property enough to purchase it, so we don't want them looking into a junkyard. Mr. Smith?
Which is exactly what I was coming to say. We've known the salvage yard was there since we started, except for in certain areas it really becomes visible. We're going to ensure with our residents and with them that we have the appropriate buffer that neither are impeding the view of one another. So
I know he's been there a long time, and it's just. I don't want our staff inundated with calls about closing a junkyard when he's been there so long.
I can understand that.
Mr. Davis, do you want to go with your question?
Yeah, I had two questions for staff, if I could. First one, if Mr. Larkin mentioned the traffic, specifically with Poplar Springs. I assume you were talking about Poplar Springs on that side of Mackland. I was wondering if we could get Mr. Jones to comment or maybe offer some thoughts on the impact of the traffic on Poplar Springs between Mackland and Hiram. I know a lot of people in that part of the county use Poplar Springs to get up into Hiram that way. Also, if Ms. Ashmore could comment after that, depending on which way the sewer issue goes, how would that or would that impact the availability for sewer access along Mackland Road? I know I've had constituent contact about this development going in, potentially opening up opportunities for places along Mackland Road to tie into sewer where they currently can't. And so I was curious, depending on what the sewer situation, which way that goes, does that impact the availability of sewer on this for the folks along Mackland?
Regarding the traffic, right now this year there were 3,200 vehicles per day on the section of Poplar Springs between Mackland and the Cobb line. It's more on the section going towards Hiram. So if they do access Poplar Springs Road as part of the development agreement, we would require them to upgrade that section of Poplar Springs to meet the speed design and basically everything else in terms of our development regulations to follow that to improve the road.
Mr. Larkin, you all were understanding and agreeing to.
Yes, we had a long meeting with them and talked about the issues on Poplar Springs.
I just want to make sure we've considered both parts of Poplar Springs, because the part of Poplar Springs between Mackland and 278 and Hiram is, I think, would be more impacted, even though the access from this development onto Poplar Springs is on the other side of Mackland. That's just making sure that we're clear about what part of that road.
Right. I guess when it comes to the traffic distribution, I think originally we thought more might be coming on Mackland Road into the site and possibly from 120 down Poplar. And then there is going to be some coming up from, Hiram on Mackland Road. But we were looking mainly at what we could do with their site to improve that section of Mackland and also the traffic signal operations at the intersection of Poplar and Mackland. Right now, we have a 100-foot left turn storage lane that's coming southbound on Poplar onto Mackland. So, we were looking at improvements to that as part of any development agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jones, do you have a timeline is when the state is going to 4-lane Mackland through there? I know that would greatly help the traffic situation.
That changes every so often. About a year ago and a half, I would have said 2017, but right now, I believe it's 2030, and I'm not going to guarantee that will not change.
To 2050?
You throw out some numbers, and eventually you'll get it right.
Well, the good news is that 92 is finally going to be 4-laned in 1983, so.
One additional comment on the impact on traffic. Windsong Properties is a little bit different than the national builders in that they develop and build all the houses in their properties, and they don't move at the kind of pace that you might expect from national builders. What are you looking at? 2 to 4 homes sold is a good month. So we're talking about this being a project that's going to take a long, long time to build out. And so it's going to ease its way into traffic. We're not going to dump all these houses on traffic in the area this year or next year or even the year after.
Ms. Ashmore, sorry, Mr. Jones.
Sorry, Jody. Let me add one more thing. Like Mr. Larkin had alluded to earlier, the trip generation for this type of housing is significantly less than a typical single-family home. So based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, for a single-family home, you're looking at 9.7 trips per day. For this type of housing, we're looking more at under 4. So it's...
Okay.
Yeah, and typically those are not during the peak, because these folks have the ability to schedule their trips. They don't need to go to Walmart at 8:30 when everyone's going to work. They get to sleep in and have a coffee.
Ms. Ashmore, can you address the question Mr. Davis had regarding sewer?
Yes, in two parts. In talking with Cobb, we are presently working on identifying the drainage basin that would be served through a Cobb agreement, and we'll be looking at the drainage basin above and along Mackland as well. And any sewers built within the development would be required, we'd extend those up any drainage features in the property so that it extends to the property lines and is accessible beyond.
So the serviceability of the sewer line would be beyond the scope of this particular project?
Correct. Yeah, that it would interconnect with the remainder of the system in that area.
Mr. Davis, does that answer your question?
I think it does. Thank you.
Yeah, in particular, we've got the pastor from the church next door here.
And
we're-
he has reached out to me, and that was part of the question there.
We've already talked, and we talked about his situation when we met with Water and Sewer Department. So.
Are there any other questions from the Board of Commissioners to the applicant? Planning Commission? Thank you.
I've got one for staff. How much does the R2 PRD that's in place change to the R55?
You're talking about like the current zoning, what could happen out there now,
Well, yeah.
which would be a maximum density of 2 units per acre, single-family home.
So is this doubling?
This right here is a little more than double. It'd be, I think this was a little over 4 units per acre. The maximum in the R55 is 5 units per acre.
Okay, thank you.
But I believe the senior pods in the PRD increased that density up to 5 already, don't they?
Well, this.
No, if the PRD senior pods have that increased density already.
Yeah, that's in a senior. If it was zoned PRD, they could do a senior. But since it's zoned residential R2, it's capped at that R2. They would have to rezone it to something else to get a different density. The R2, if they didn't come in and zone it, would be 2 units per acre max, which may actually produce a yield of 1.5 to 1.7.
But you're seeing a higher density because the zoning request here is
Because the
R55.
higher density, the senior living district allows a higher density.
Are there any other questions for the applicant or staff? Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Is there anyone else that would wish to speak on behalf of this application? There is some minutes remaining. Hearing none, is there anyone that would wish to speak in opposition to this application or may have questions, comments, or concerns? If you would, come to the podium, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to me.
My name's Noel Dillard, and all that property line on that side of that thing is mine. See the little white house on the left-hand side of that property? That's my house.
Okay.
All that land drains that way right onto my property. I've got a lake there. When y'all allowed the church to put in there at the church, they come down there 2 times and had to dig the lake out because of runoff. We need to involve the EPA in this before we do anything. With 349 houses, you're assuming there's gonna be 700 cars more on Macklin Road. You was asking the difference is when the state gonna 4-lane the road. They told me in 2022. So you're talking about, what, 3 years
Could
and a
you
half
do me a
down the
favor
road.
before you go any further, just so that I can clearly understand where you are? Can
See the
just
little white
use your
house on that
finger.
picture?
There's a camera right above you. If you could point on that piece of paper.
Right there, yeah, right there where you
Gotcha.
pointed.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're looking on the
I've
opposite
got
side.
17, me and my son's got 17 acres out there.
Gotcha now.
And where the church is, that driveway right beside the church goes down to my property.
Okay.
So when the guy built my house 45 years ago, he built about 20 foot off the line, which that puts me right on the property line. I'm requiring at least 50-foot buffer there between my house and where these houses are gonna be. But there's gonna be a lot of runoff on that, water-wise. Nobody hadn't asked me anything about it, they just assume that they could walk on me and whatever.
Okay. Your concern is primarily the drainage runoff from the
Well, one
development?
thing, a lot of things gonna be traffic, gonna be everything. You can't hardly get out of Smith Road out there now on the highway every day, it's awful.
Okay.
Sometimes I have to sit there 5 minutes just to get on Macklin Road. But I like to have a bigger buffer. In my personal opinion, this needs to be postponed till they get Macklin Road 4-lane.
All right. Is there any questions for the individual, Mr. Dillard, right?
Dillard, yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure I got your name right. Is there any questions for Mr. Dillard from the Planning Commission? Board of Commissioners? Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who would wish to speak in opposition or may have questions or comments? Please come in, come up front, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Hello. I really wish my husband would have been in here, but for the only day today, we had to babysit, so he had to take the baby out. My name is Angela Western. I'm not good with any of this, so y'all were talking about Myers. Below Myers, that's me. The whole, and you said there was a camera here or something? This is me, and this is me. This 20-acre plat, I'm sorry, yes. This is me.
Okay.
I didn't know nothing about none of this was happening either. I'm assuming that line, I know that's crazy. My concern and my husband's number one was the traffic. That road is just absolutely awful. We spoke with a gentleman before now. He said they've been working with the DOT. We had another accident there just like 2 or 3 days ago. Someone passed away again. The traffic, it's like I can stand at my front door and look, and it's like a freeway. Just unbelievable. We've been there since 1988, so I didn't just move there. We built just, I don't know, we just want to say country. But like again, our concern is the traffic, and then I know they're talking about buffers, and the back of my property, I don't see an issue, but that whole side part right there, I mean, I don't want to look out my bedroom window at the back of a house. I mean, I don't know, we're just like dumbfounded, we don't know, I don't even know what to say. But the main thing would be the traffic on that road is just, it's awful. And having an entrance in that way, I know that probably don't have anything to do but with the DOT. I mean, there's no way an entrance to any facility or any place could be right there on that road. But I guess that's it. I just wanted to voice my opinion about the traffic on that road, and just hopefully they'll let us know where anything would be put that would, because like I said, we just kind of want to keep it family. My kids were going to build back there in the back, but if something like that goes in, that's going to not be too good. So, but anyway, that's it, I guess.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wish to speak in opposition to this application or may have questions or comments? Hearing none, if the applicant will please come back around. I'm sorry, come around. Sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here and hearing this out. The folks in Winsong, they seem pretty easy to work with, but we still have some
Could
concerns.
we get your name before you get?
Yeah, I'm still writing, sorry.
Things.
Russell Smith, and our farm is here. And to the east, we've got 65 acres there. We bought that in 1953, and I'm pretty certain when my granddaddy bought it, he had a mind for selling it later. And we certainly don't want to stand in the way of of anybody doing the same. Like I said, we would like to just voice our concerns. Traffic. I've lived on that street my entire life, and when I was 14 years old, we set up bicycle ramps and rode all day, and never had a problem. If a car came along, they went around it, but it wasn't often that a car came around, and that was probably about 1985, 1986 when that was going on. It was a dirt road prior to that. Your section of Poplar Springs there, I think, was dirt up until 1991. And all that leads to a lot of, we don't have fire protection for either side of our street. We don't have cable television. We don't have gas. So we just want to make sure that whatever they do choose to do and whatever the board allows them has our interest in mind as well. We just want to be good neighbors. I think somebody earlier addressed the turn light there at Macklin. That would definitely be something we would be open for. But our biggest concern as my family being what we call downstream, even though there are no water sources, streams or lakes on that property, is the runoff. And I think one of the ladies did mention earlier that they really hadn't established the drainage basin, but you can see that anvil horn that goes to the east. That is a drainage ditch that crosses our property on its southern border. We just want to make sure that the amount of water, the runoff that we get now is equivalent to what they put in later. We would be very open to even the dead end of Poplar Springs Road. Based on the plan that you had up here earlier, I don't know how you changed that, but yeah, go ahead and put that up. Oh, I could have just lifted it. How about that? It's oriented a little different. You got a detention pond here, so that seems like that's a step in the right direction. But if there was a cul-de-sac here and close that off, I mean, that would make a lot of us happy. I think the last time Paulding DOT did a traffic count, 2,700 cars a day was the average. And to a good point, a community like this doesn't add a lot of folks, and that's a good thing. So we feel like this is the best possible use for the land. As far as that goes, the density concerns us, the density to value, about smaller houses not costing as much to begin with and maybe not being worth as much later. So I guess to sum it up, our concerns are the density, the size of the houses. We would like to see smaller lots and larger houses. We think the idea of active adult is as good as we could ask for. We do totally support that. But as the project progresses, we would just like to see our concerns addressed with traffic and infrastructure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank y'all for hearing us out. And wish y'all luck with it.
Since I miss Mr. Smith, I'm going to ask again, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition or may have questions or comments regarding this application? Hearing none, seeing none.
I don't have opposition, but...
You need to come to the podium to speak. If you would, sign in, state your name.
My name is Pamela Eccles-Sturkey. This is my property. It's been in my family for years and years and years. And it was hard to come to a decision for this project. This project, in my opinion, is much better, this project, than a commercialized or anything like that. Single homes, this, as we stated, the senior living will be much less traffic, a lot less disturbance calls from sheriff office. I don't think they have a lot of disturbance, but in regards to Mr. Dillard's statement, I think that
If you would
the
please direct-
runoff
if
with
you would
your.
please direct your comments to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. The runoff that he was talking about, this project will correct that instead of deter it, because it will be graded as such. In response to his talking about Smith Road, that road is closed to no through traffic, so I don't have the understanding of what concern that would be. I don't know if Mr. Dillard lives there, it would be a concern. I'm not sure whether he resides there or not. But I think that you all would be very pleased with these homes in response to, I can't think of her name that spoke before. I think you would be very pleased if you'll go look at these Windsong properties. They are very, very nice, a whole lot nicer than what's there right now. That I think it's going to be very nice, and I have been through the construction, watching them. I have gone to different phases of the projects that this company has done because it is my property and I have concern for it, not only for myself. I'm going to live there in one of these, but for my neighbors and my family are neighbors also. The quality of this building and project is remarkable. I've been in when they were framing the ones in Cobb County, and they are very, very nice built. And not only that, but they are very pretty. They will not be an eyesore, or I don't think it would bother any neighbor around. I would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
That was Mrs. Eccles-Turkey, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to chalk that up to speaking on behalf of, which is going to count against some of the minutes for Mr. Larkin, if you would like to come back around.
Thank you. I'll be brief, even if I have more time. I don't know, when we were, or when the county and you were considering adoption of the R55 ordinance, I remember at that time, we invited a great number of folks, and I think including in your board, out to see some of the Windsong properties, and I know some of the commissioners took advantage of that opportunity. So I don't think there's any way anyone here would question the quality of the product they put out, and they've been doing it consistently for 30 years or more, probably longer. I know of it for that long. So the quality is not going to be something that can be challenged. There are concerns in that area, and we appreciate that. And regardless of who our neighbors are, this is intended to be a community. And we've seen that with some of the elevations. The purpose and goal is to have a community of people who get along in a pleasurable experience, who enjoy living there. Because of that, meticulous care is taken to the way all the buffers are designed around the property. And I don't know Mr. Dillard's situation. I haven't looked at his house, and it may be beautiful, it may not, and he's entitled to a good view, and we are too. And I can assure you that we will look at the situation along his property line, and we will make sure that there's an adequate buffer in there that works both ways. As far as runoff, she was correct. Even if we didn't want to, even if we were the worst, lowest builder on earth, you wouldn't let us affect the runoff onto his adjoining property. We are required by law, whether we want to or not, to plan every square inch of that property to control the water, and we will certainly do so, and your staff will make sure that we do that. Traffic is the big challenge here, and it's an existing challenge. It's a challenge we're aware of. We're aware of the circumstances on both roads. We're actively engaged with the state DOT and the county, and I don't know what participation, if any, Cobb is playing in the Poplar Springs discussion, because that's the county line there, I believe. And that's why we're able to access the sewer there. So we're looking at what can be done with Poplar Springs. One of our sellers owns property directly across Poplar Springs, and we may surprise him, but that's one thing that we can discuss is whether there might be some room to realign that road a little bit. There's a lot of things that have been discussed. The cul-de-sac was discussed, but the county is not in favor of that. They told us that immediately. So we're engaged.
You're speaking of cul-de-sacing?
Cul-de-sac in Poplar Springs
okay.
in some way, or roundabouting or whatever. What they told us is the most important thing to do there is to improve that intersection, to increase the length of the stacking, and we're committed to working with them on that. Thank you.
Just a moment. There may be questions for you, but
Sure.
that was the extent of your time. You have about a minute and a half remaining if it's necessary. But going to ask first from the Planning Commission, are there any questions to the applicant regarding anything that we've just heard? Are there any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Okay. And I'm glad that you did address the questions that came out. I mean, the two major themes that I saw running through this obviously was traffic. Traffic is a byproduct of being in an area close to an urbanized location or state route a lot of times. And I know that the county does a very good job of trying to manage traffic best they can with development as it comes through. Stormwater is another thing that is a big issue, and any type of development that removes canopy and permeable surface, being ground, dirt, whatever, where water would typically be absorbed, creates runoff. If you have a shingled roof or any type of rooftop or paved driveway or street system, that's going to create water runoff, which can flow to other adjacent properties if proper precautions are not taken. And you are right, it is a state requirement, and this is the Planning Commission where it's to determine whether or not this proposed use for this property is appropriate for the location. What happens after this, assuming, and this is an assumption, I'm not prejudging the vote of this board, but if it were to pass, they would still at that point have to go before the Board of Commissioners. If it were to pass there, then they would still, once they're ready to try to start pulling permits, have to go through a plan review process. And it's at that process that the county, with all their technical staff, would sit down with them to determine what can and cannot be done in relation to the development. And that includes the stormwater runoff. That includes access to the county and state routes. And of course, the state route would be soliciting information from the state DOT to gain their permit for an access or an easement. And in both those locations, the county is going to require site distance surveys to ensure that the entry point of that development into any of those roadways is going to meet a site distance requirement based on the speed of the road or the 85th percentile of the any kind of study that's done. So that all being said, the one question that I do have in relation to what was stated by those that may be in opposition or have comments or concerns is the buffers between this development and the other properties. You have a required buffer that is mandated and stipulated by the county's development regulations. Is there any consideration on the part of the developer, your client, as to whether or not they would increase those buffers in order to accommodate the concerns voiced by those that we've heard speak today? Is that something that you can address at this point?
I believe.
I believe the minimum requirement buffers are 15 feet per the code. We've already drawn on 25, but in any area where we feel concerned that our visual presence is going to be impacting the neighbors and vice versa, we'll definitely give it consideration. That's why we've asked for disturbed buffers rather than undisturbed buffers. That way I can berm and plant where needed to further hide the properties from each other. The other thing I want to point out to is the one comment about looking at the sides of houses. We build single-story homes. They're not two-story, they're not three-story, they're single-story homes with possible bonus room up in the roof itself, but they're single-story homes. Therefore, it's your best option for what you are going to be looking at, and we will take careful care with our buffers to make sure that we're the best neighbors possible. We're going to be there a while, and it's just to be the best community we can be. We're going to make it best for our neighbors and our residents.
Well, I cannot, and I'm certainly not going to prejudge you either,
Right.
Because you're saying that that's what you're going to do. I'll take you at face value as far as that goes until you prove that you're not going to do that. That's really all we can do. There's no way that I can lay that out in a stipulation that we could duly adopt.
Right.
But I would appreciate if you would, when you have a concern being brought to you by a neighboring property, that you take that time to understand
Absolutely.
what their concerns are.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission? Board of Commissioners? Mr.
Yeah,
Collette?
I want to clarify something. I believe the gentleman that spoke talking about the cul-de-sac, I don't think he was talking about putting a cul-de-sac on Poplar Springs. I think he was talking about inside your property and only having one entrance in and out on Macklin. Isn't that correct?
No, he and I spoke earlier. He was actually talking about closing Poplar Springs Road.
He was talking, okay.
That would be the best in our mind, that would be the best possible solution.
Board of Commissioners, any further questions to the applicant? Planning Commission? Thank you very much.
Thank you. This yours?
Okay, at this time, I would ask or entertain a motion regarding application 2018-10-Z. I would ask that you also consider the amending of stipulations 12 to say if Cobb County provides sewer service. I guess I've been remiss, Ms. Ashmore, is that acceptable to you?
Yes,
And then
those proposed changes
16
are
as well.
acceptable.
And then on 16, it would be if Paulding County provides sewer service to preface both those stipulations. Furthermore, there was a request to add the similar stipulation as we did on the previous application of a 19th stipulation to determine a landscaping plan for the allowance of disturbed buffers so that those buffers could be replanted. That language would need to be worked out between both this meeting and the Board of Commissioners meeting this evening if you add that stipulation. Is that okay, Ms. Skipper? So it's a lot to say, but I need a motion from someone to do something. So.
I'd make a motion that we approve with the 19 stipulations with the addition of the replanted buffer if they are disturbed, and the
modifications
in 12 and 16 with the determination of where the sewer is going to Cobb or Paulding.
Braden, you got that? Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Leggett for the approval of the 18 stipulations and adding a 19th with the amendment to stipulation 12 and 16, determining who would be providing sewer service to this development. Do I have a second? I have a second from Ms. Battle. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. Mr. Robinson.
Next application is 2018-11Z, application by Americo Real Estate Company to rezone approximately 7.806 acres from B1 General Business District to B2 Highway Business for U-Haul moving and storage store. Property is located in land lots 147 and 150, District 19, Section 2. It's on the north side of Charles Hardy Parkway, west of Aspen Drive. It's in Commission Post 1. The application is recommended by staff for approval with 15 printed stipulations. We had one adjoining property owner asking about connectivity, which we had discussed, and the applicant is present.
The applicant, please come around, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Good afternoon. Name is John Hairston, President, U-Haul Company of Georgia. Thanks for having me here today. We're proposing to build a 3-story U-Haul facility to get some of our uses there. Uses consist of self-storage, truck and trailer share, as well as related retail sales. The interior of our building will house the self-storage units, and this new development will allow U-Haul to better serve the needs of the community and activate a property that is currently vacant, as you guys kind of see here. The property is currently zoned B1, general business, and falls within the corridor overlay. The use of the self-storage and truck and trailer share requires rezoning to B2. with a special use permit for self-storage at this location. I'm proposing to apply for a rezoning permit to allow these uses. We're a commercial type business, of course, that uses residential, that serves residential community, within a 3 to 5 mile radius. We feel U-Haul would be an appropriate use for this property, and there are proven benefits for allowing self-storage facilities in communities. One, self-storage facilities are quiet, provide excellent buffer between zones, create very little traffic, and have little impact on utilities, no impact on schools, and provide good tax revenue and provide community service. Our stores characteristically serve the do-it-yourself household customer. The U-Haul store will be staffed with about 10 to 15 employees from the community, both full and part-time. So families will generally arrive in their own automobiles, enter the showroom, and may choose from a variety of products and services that we offer. Do have one request, that we're able to discuss some of the stipulations with staff after the meeting.
Well, that would typically be my first question to you, is you're aware of the 15 listed stipulations, and are you agreeable to them?
Yes.
All right. Are there any questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission? Board of Commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Harrison. You may take your seat.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here that would wish to speak on behalf of this application? Is there anyone here that would wish to speak in opposition to this application or may have questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion with regard to application 2018-11-Z.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? I just thought of it.
Yes, sir.
There's a large area of land to the right there that is undesignated. Just brings up a question, is what's the plan for that? And is there any independent trucking or parking plan for this site?
I will suspend my request for a motion. Mr. Hairston, could you please come back to the podium, please? The question from Mr. Green, the county staff, would be whether or not that property, you're talking about the property to the right, that
Are we talking
blank
about
area.
this property right here?
Yes, is to understand more fully if you have intentions for that moving forward. Will you be parking RVs or trucks or utilizing it for any other use?
No, I don't think that's part of our property right there.
But the application for the rezoning would encompass the entirety of the
Oh, excuse
property,
me.
is that correct?
Yeah. Let's take a look at this. That's the paved area.
That's the area outside the dark line, and that's
No.
right there?
No.
No?
No.
And I don't know the topography of that, but I would assume it's been graded just as well as the rest of it, so.
That's correct.
This area original zoning to B1. I think it encompasses from that original zoning.
Okay.
It's a part of what he's
Okay.
Right.
Slope.
Yeah.
Mr. Green,
It's
do you have any
sloped
other
right
questions?
there.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have a question, Mr. Collette?
Can you clarify who owns that now, or who's going to?
That piece, is that something that,
Is that part of their
owned by
property?
U-Haul or by your company?
It would be a part of this property.
It would be a part of the property, so it
This-
would share
this
the same
area-
zoning.
It's this area right here, and this is a little bit challenged topography-wise.
Right, a little slopey.
It slopes.
Okay. But you have no intended use for it at this time?
No, sir. Do not.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Ashmore?
Just a point to clarify. Are you in agreement with the stipulations, or were you asking that you wanted to talk to staff about changing stipulations?
I am in agreement. I do have questions for staff.
Any other questions from the Board of Commissioners? Planning Commission, before we move forward? Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll ask for a motion on item Application 2018-11-Z. I have a motion from Ms. Battle to approve with the 15 listed stipulations. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Mr. Hornback. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. And I would now look for the next application, Mr. Robinson.
Okay. This next application is actually the second step in this process for the use on this tract of property for self-storage and such. It requires a special use permit in a B2 zoning district. And so this application is the SUP part of it. It's 2018-03 SUP application by Americo Real Estate Company for a special use permit on approximately 7.806 acres for self-storage. Property is located in land lots 147 and 150, District 19, Section 2, north side of Charles Hardy Parkway, west of Aspen Drive. It's in Post 1. We also recommend approval with the same 15 stipulations as were presented for rezoning application 2018-11Z. Of course, is present.
Mr. Hairston.
Good to see you all again.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so moving and storage, they're very synergistic. Over half our storage customers tell us they've used U-Haul storage because of a household move. Customers will typically use U-Haul equipment or their personal vehicle to approach the loading area and enter the building through a singular customer entrance. All U-Haul stores are designed with interior storage room access, giving the customer the added value of increased security and the community the benefit of a more aesthetically pleasing exterior. So we're seeking to have a special use permit for self-storage at this site.
Are there any questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission? Mr. Stokes.
Yes. Will any of the units be climate controlled?
Yes, absolutely.
Approximately what percentage of them will be just standard, or do you know that?
Yeah, all of these will be interior, so they will all be climate controlled.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant? Board of Commissioners? Mr. Green, do you have something?
Yeah, that's my reach. I'm way out at the end.
Just a question about the parking and the truck sharing. Some of these storage centers can actually lease space for individuals to park personal vehicles, boats, trailers, RVs, that type of thing. And I'm not sure if I heard you or not, but is that one of your business plans for this site?
No, it is not.
And truck sharing, is that just a new term for renting a truck?
Similar, yes.
All right. Thank you.
You got it.
Are there any other questions for the applicant from the Board of Commissioners? Mr. Carmichael, if y'all would please pass him the mic.
Get my glasses back on. On land lot 149 to the west, my question would be, I know there were some agreements several years ago about easement to connect with a church that exists north of there. Is there any easement there, or I'm just curious?
You're talking about the one that you were showing me didn't have the easements on it, did it?
No.
See that bridge?
Chairman, I think it's stip number 4. We talk about basically the proposed driveway near the west property line shall accommodate joint use. an interparcel access for the Northerly and Westerly adjoining tracts, and we were going off a 2007 memorandum of understanding where all this came from.
So that stays in effect?
That's where the interparcel access came from, so that part stays in effect. I can't speak for the memorandum of understanding, but the stipulation as we provided is in effect.
As a part of your overall development regulations, you do require interparcel connectivity where possible, is that correct?
That's correct.
It's required of the Highway Overlay District, which they're a part of, and also this stipulation refers back to the prior zoning on this case, which this is was a site plan back then, and it's to ensure connectivity to that western tract, as well as the church was a part of that understanding also, and even come back here.
And that is something that you're aware of, Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
It's not a surprise?
Not a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're okay with it? Is there any further questions, Mr. Carmichael, or anybody else from the Board of Commissioners? Mr. Parnell? That's the original rezoning. Yeah.
I apologize. George, could you clarify that again? Please. Thank you, sir.
Step number 4, basically, we feel that the interparcel access for the northerly and westerly adjoining tracts need to be taken into account with this development. So, and also, like Jody had said, as part of the district, it has to provide interconnectivity to the different parcels.
Is that clear?
I think so. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the Board of Commissioners?
Still clarifying here, because the applicant, has the structure actually built, the way I see it, on that western boundary of what you're purchasing, or what you're not purchasing, what you're applying for, so. I don't know, I haven't read the MOU as to any agreement that lies to that connectivity to the church.
And it'd be back here. That connection would run down that western property line.
I want to make sure it didn't affect the applicant. If, anything that you're planning to do, that MOU wouldn't come back and preclude the building that you've got depicted.
Right, no issue here. Yeah, it sits to the right. Yeah, we have room there. There's no issue.
Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Plus, the site plan that's presented here will be looked at in plan review, and all of those accommodations for interparcel access to the east and to the western portion of the property and the northern portion of the property will be addressed at that time as well, and probably may require some amendments to the site plan overall. That's not going to be set in stone once it goes beyond what we do and what the Board of Commissioners do. Plan review will at that point make sure that the accommodations necessary for those other attaching properties are taken care of. Is there any other questions, or if staff wants to elaborate more on that, you're more than welcome to. Any other questions from the Board of Commissioners to the applicant? Planning Commission? Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you.
At this time, I will entertain a motion on application 2018-03-SUP. The 15 stipulations. I have a motion to approve from Ms. Battle. I have a second from Mr. Stokes. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. I say 4, it's 15. I said 15 steps, didn't I? Thank you. Mr. Robinson, you got something?
I just had one more, I guess, request. We're looking at go ahead and scheduling a November hearing, and just wanted to see if your availability. We were looking at the Tuesday after Thanksgiving week, which would be November the 27th.
Y'all just can't do without us, can you?
Well, we used to have November meetings, and then it got real slack, and then the past 2 years, we've had to add one, and then this one, we're figuring we might as well go ahead and get this thing planned out, as well as next year, we'll probably go ahead and schedule a November meeting in 2019.
I've already looked at my calendar. I have no problems with it, but please take
What
a
day is
moment.
that, November?
It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. It would just be the planning commission that afternoon. Anything recommended at that time would be forwarded to the board of commissioners at their December meeting. Yes, it'll be their first meeting or their only meeting in December. December 11th.
So the meeting we're talking about, all the L-tryptophan from the turkey will be worn off, so we'll.
That's exactly right.
Just making sure. I think we're okay with that for those that are here. Those that are not, you can contact them and see, but I think we're
Exactly.
okay.
We'll follow up with emails.
All right.
And thank you very much.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn from Ms. Battle, a second from Mr. Leggett. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you very much for your participation today.